Yes, officer, I'm calling to report a trespasser on community land. He's refusing to leave. He's got guns, yes, real weapons. He's dangerous and claims this is his ranch. Please hurry. That was Karen's voice. Sharp, loud, and full of fake panic. I was standing less than 20 feet away from her, watching her scream into her phone while pointing directly at me, on my own land. Her oversized sunglasses sat crooked on her nose, and her perfectly ironed beige blouse fluttered in the breeze as if it, too, was full of rage. I stood there, arms crossed, boots firm in the dirt, wearing my old gray sheriff's department hoodie and a ball cap with the faded American flag. I didn't say a word. I didn't move. I didn't need to. Karen, the self-declared president of the HOA, had just called 911 on me, not knowing I was a retired police chief with 35 years of service, and I had built this ranch with my own hands. But what happened next? That's what changed everything. Because 5 minutes later, 3 patrol cars rolled up fast, sirens blaring, dust flying, guns drawn, and one of those young officers jumped out of the cruiser shouting, "Hands where I can see them! Now!" I raised my hand slowly, but I also gave him a look. The kind of look only someone who trained hundreds of officers over 3 decades could give. He hesitated, just long enough for me to say calmly, "You might want to check the name on that gate sign, son. You're standing on my ranch." The other officer looked down, then up again. His eyes widened. He mouthed something to his partner. Then, silence. Karen kept screaming. But the officers? They froze. They stared. And suddenly, everything shifted. But before I tell you what happened when they finally recognized who I was and why Karen's lies backfired in the worst way possible, let's rewind to how this crazy mess all started. It began on a sunny Tuesday morning. Birds were chirping. I had just finished fixing a fence near the creek that separated my 20-acre ranch from the edge of the gated community across the dry creek bed. Now, let's get something straight. My ranch isn't part of that HOA. Never was, never will be. My land sits outside their boundaries, legally recorded way back in the 1970s. But over time, as the neighborhood expanded, the HOA got a little too bold, claiming land, enforcing made-up rules, and treating anyone nearby like tenants in their private kingdom. And that's where Karen comes in. Karen Miller, 50-something, platinum blonde bob, always wore cardigans that matched her purse, drove a spotless white SUV with HOA tags on it, and worst of all, believed she ran the world because she was elected HOA president 3 months ago. She and her little group of clipboard-carrying cronies had tried everything: letters, warnings, even fines addressed to resident at 1919 Horseshoe Trail, which wasn't even my address. I had laughed it off at first. I'd retired only a year earlier and thought maybe it was just a misunderstanding. But it didn't stop. One afternoon I saw Karen walking the property line with binoculars like she was on patrol. Another time she tried to tell a plumber working for me that he needed HOA approval to park his truck by the barn. But things got really bad the day my grandkids came over for the weekend. That Saturday, I set up a small bounce house for the kids near the east pasture. Nothing fancy, just a little fun. Their laughter filled the air. My daughter and her husband were smiling, grilling hot dogs. We were all enjoying ourselves. Then Karen pulled up. She didn't even park properly, just left her SUV in the middle of the dirt road and marched over like she was walking into a courtroom. "Excuse me, you can't just host a public event here. This is protected HOA land," she shouted, waving a binder in her hand like it was the Constitution. I looked at her, calm, friendly even. "Karen, you're on my land. That fence line back there? That's your edge." She scoffed, turned around and stormed off. "We'll see about that," she muttered. The next day, a neon pink flyer was taped to my ranch gate. HOA violation notice. Unauthorized use of shared community space. Cease immediately. I chuckled and tossed it. But then came the drone. No kidding. Karen sent a drone over my ranch. It hovered above the horse barn, dipped low near the chicken coop, then zipped around the kids' playset. I was furious. Not just because it was creepy, but because it scared my horses and made my 6-year-old granddaughter cry. That's when I knew I had to draw the line, so I posted a large wooden sign at the ranch entrance. Private ranch, not HOA property. Trespassers will be recorded. I even added cameras near the gate, solar-powered ones with motion sensors and cloud backup. Years on the force had taught me one thing: always collect evidence. But even with all that, I didn't expect what came next. Karen showed up again the following week, this time with a landscaper, a measuring wheel, and a long yellow tape. I watched from the porch as they stomped around, measuring imaginary boundaries, taking pictures, and pointing toward my porch swing like it was the Eiffel Tower. That night I filed a formal cease and desist with the county records office. I attached my property deeds, survey maps, and aerial photos. Everything was clean and clear. But none of that mattered to Karen. Because 2 days later, she called 911. She told them a suspicious man was living illegally on community property and possibly armed. And the moment the officers rolled up in front of my gate, I knew she'd gone too far. Now, as they stood there, guns slowly lowering, eyes darting between their tablets and the name on my mailbox, I stayed still. Then one of them whispered something into his radio. Karen stepped closer, now nervous. "Arrest him!" she shouted, pointing at me. "What are you waiting for?" I could see the hesitation in the officer's eyes. They had heard that voice before, maybe on a radio call, maybe in training. One young deputy adjusted his body cam, looked me over again, and asked gently, "Sir, do you have ID?" I nodded. "It's inside. Or you can call Chief Harlan down at Precinct 11. Tell him Frank Marshall said hi." Their eyes widened. But before they could respond, before they could even open their mouths, Karen snapped again, shouting, "He's lying. He's not who he says he is. He's trespassing. He's—" Boom. A loud pop echoed from the barn. Everyone turned. The sound came from the stall where my horses were. And just then, my old stallion came limping out, blood dripping from his leg. Somebody had shot my horse. And that's where everything changed. Who did it? Why? And how was Karen involved? Stay tuned, because the next part of this story reveals a truth nobody saw coming. But before we go on, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below and tell me. Have you ever dealt with someone like Karen? The moment I saw Duke, my old stallion, stumble out of the barn with a bloody leg, something deep inside me snapped. I had trained SWAT officers, led hostage rescues, diffused standoffs, but nothing boils your blood like watching a defenseless animal suffer, especially one you raised from birth. Karen screamed, clutching her pearls like she'd seen a ghost. The officers immediately rushed toward the barn, guns out again, this time with a very different kind of urgency. "Stay back, ma'am," one of them said firmly to Karen, stepping in front of her. Another officer knelt beside Duke, gently pressing cloth to the wound. "He's been grazed. Small caliber. Probably a .22. I followed the blood trail with my eyes. It was fresh. The shot had been fired just moments before. And there was only one direction it could have come from: the tree line near the HOA's walking trail, about 30 yards past my back pasture. "You got cameras back there?" the lead deputy asked me. I nodded. "Top of the barn roof. Motion sensor kicked in when the drone came last week. Might have caught something." He turned to his partner. "Secure the drive. Chain of custody starts now." Karen, still trying to control the situation, shouted, "This is nonsense. That horse was already injured. I didn't hear any gunshot. He's lying to cover up his illegal squat." "That's enough," I barked, stepping forward. The commanding tone in my voice, cold, direct, the kind that made rookie cops freeze, shut her right up. The younger officer finally spoke. "Ma'am, step aside while we investigate. You are not to interfere." Karen's eyes darted wildly. Her lips trembled. She was losing her grip on the scene she thought she could control. Meanwhile, I walked with a slight limp toward the barn, my hand gently brushing Duke's neck. "Easy, boy. We'll fix you up," I whispered. I called my vet, a friend named Dr. Paige Foster. She said she'd be there in 20 minutes. As the officer secured the barn, I pulled up the video feed from the barn cam on my tablet. I scrolled back to the minute we heard the pop. And there it was. The grainy footage showed a figure ducking behind the fence, holding what looked like a short rifle. One frame captured a muzzle flash right before Duke reared back in pain. You couldn't see the face, but the jacket was familiar. Green windbreaker, HOA logo on the sleeve. I turned the screen toward the officers. One of them whistled. That's attempted animal cruelty. If the HOA is tied to this goes beyond trespassing. They immediately called it in. Meanwhile, Karen had retreated to her SUV, arms crossed, talking on the phone with someone. Probably her lawyer, or one of her minions on the HOA board. But the thing about people like Karen is this. They don't act alone. They build little empires of gossip, fear, and power. They recruit neighbors, twist rules, use intimidation. She wasn't just trying to remove me from my own land. She was trying to erase everything I built. Let me rewind a bit so you understand why this was personal. I wasn't always a rancher. I spent most of my adult life as a cop. Started in Chicago, then moved out to Arizona, became a detective, then captain, and finally chief of police for our district. I served 35 years. Clean record, no scandals, just good, honest work. When I retired, I used every dollar of my pension and savings to buy this land. 20 acres of rough terrain with a broken-down barn and a rusted-out gate. I rebuilt it. By hand. I raised animals, built fences, gave my grandkids a place to ride horses and learn about the land. This ranch wasn't just dirt and wood. It was peace. It was healing. And Karen? She wanted to turn it into a manicured walking trail for her HOA yoga club. She had brought it up at the town council meeting 3 months back, suggesting that my ranch would be better used as green space for community development. I didn't say anything then. But now she'd drawn blood. Dr. Page arrived 20 minutes later, just as promised. She's sharp, early 40s, quick on her feet, and probably the only vet in town who doesn't flinch at the sight of a gunshot wound on an animal. She examined Duke and confirmed it was a surface wound, painful but non-life-threatening. He'll limp for a while, but he'll be okay, she said, gently wrapping his leg. Still, you need to find out who did this, because next time, it could be worse. I know, I said. That's why I called in backup. She looked at me, confused. Backup? Right then, a black SUV pulled up quietly through my ranch's side road. Out stepped a tall man in his 50s, silver beard, dark sunglasses, and a black suit. Captain Raymond Trask, my old partner from the force, now with the state's Criminal Investigations Bureau. You said it was urgent, he said, shaking my hand. I nodded toward the barn. I think we've got a conspiracy forming. He grinned. Then let's take it apart. Karen must have seen him arrive. Her face paled. She locked her doors, but we saw her watching from behind the tinted glass. The young deputy returned from the barn and whispered, Chief, we found bullet casings near the back fence. They match the caliber on your stallion. We've flagged the HOA trail as a potential crime scene. Raymond raised an eyebrow. Looks like Karen's in deeper than she thought. Later that evening, just as the sun was dipping behind the hills, I sat with Raymond on the porch, drinking black coffee, our old boots up on the rail. This isn't just HOA overreach, he said. This is targeted harassment. Borderline racketeering if the HOA board's involved. I know, I said quietly. She won't stop until someone makes her. And we will. Just then, the motion sensor light at the gate clicked on. A figure appeared walking slowly toward us. Not Karen, not a cop. Someone new. He held a white envelope, nervous, sweating. And when he got close enough, I recognized him. Paul Carter, HOA secretary, younger guy, lived in the neighborhood's model home. Always looked a bit uneasy when Karen was around. Mr. Marshall, I need to talk to you, he said, his voice shaking. He held out the envelope. Inside, printed emails, signed documents, HOA meeting minutes, and at the very bottom of the stack, a list. A list of targeted properties the HOA board planned to reclaim through intimidation, false violation notices, and legal loopholes. My ranch was number one, but I wasn't the only one on it. Raymond stood up slowly. "You ready to take them down?" I looked at him, then at Paul, then at the list, and I nodded. But before we could say more, a loud crash echoed from the side barn. We rushed over. What we found stopped us in our tracks, because the side barn had been broken into, and a fire had just been started in one of the feed bins. The flames were rising fast, and someone had left a gas can behind. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was war. Flames licked the wooden beams like hungry fingers, snapping and crackling in the dry Arizona air. The side barn was going up fast. "Call it in," I shouted, tossing my coffee aside and sprinting for the fire extinguisher mounted near the porch. Raymond was already dialing. "We've got an active fire on Horseshoe Trail, possible arson. Get the fire department out here now." By the time I got back, the flames had climbed halfway up the hay wall. I pulled the pin and aimed the extinguisher, dousing the base of the fire with thick white foam, coughing as smoke filled the air. Paul Carter stood frozen, still clutching the envelope of evidence, his face pale and his mouth open. "You," I snapped, pointing at him. "Grab that hose by the water tank, now." He jumped into action, unraveling the old green hose, and within seconds a burst of cold water sprayed onto the rising flames. Raymond and I worked side by side, our boots slipping in the mud as we beat back the fire inch by inch. After 10 grueling minutes, the flames hissed into silence, leaving only scorched beams, smoke, and blackened feed. My heart pounded, not just from the exertion, but from the weight of what we'd just witnessed. This was no accident. Someone had tried to burn me out, and they'd nearly succeeded. Raymond stared at the melted plastic handle of the gas can lying near the barn door. "They weren't just sending a message. They wanted you gone, Frank. Gone, gone." I looked at the surveillance camera mounted just above the barn. The red light was blinking, still working, still recording. "Let's see who lit the match," I muttered. We pulled the feed onto my laptop inside. The footage was grainy but clear enough to see someone slipping through the side gate around 8:37 p.m., 20 minutes before the flames broke out. The figure was wearing a hoodie, slim build, quick movements. They didn't face the camera directly, but one moment froze everything in place. As the person lifted the gas can, the sleeve of their hoodie pulled back just slightly, revealing a bright gold watch. Unique. Flashy. Raymond leaned closer. "That's not something a random vandal wears." Paul, still trembling, whispered, "That looks like Greg's watch." I turned to him. "Greg?" He nodded slowly. "Greg Matthews, HOA board treasurer. He brags about that Rolex all the time. Karen gave it to him last Christmas after they passed the vote to expand HOA surveillance funding. They've been close." Raymond straightened. "So it's not just Karen. This is bigger." I stood, my blood boiling. "She's not just trying to control my land. She's trying to take it." The fire chief arrived 15 minutes later, along with 2 fire trucks. They confirmed what we already knew: deliberate arson. The deputy on night duty took our statements and secured the gas can as evidence. Raymond handed over a copy of the surveillance footage. They promised to investigate, but I knew better. Investigations take time, and people like Karen, they don't wait. The next morning, I woke to find another surprise at my gate. A bright red banner had been strung across it, flapping in the wind. It read, "You were warned. Leave now or pay the price." The letters were spray-painted in black. Below it, a crudely drawn stick figure of a man, on fire. I tore the banner down and tossed it on the ground, breathing deeply to calm myself. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "You don't belong here. Sell the land while you still can." I handed the phone to Raymond. He was already sipping coffee on the porch, boots crossed, eyes scanning the trees. He scrolled through the message, then looked up. "She's getting reckless, that's good." I raised an eyebrow. "How is that good?" Because when people like her get sloppy, they leave evidence. Later that day, I went into town with Paul and Raymond. We met with an attorney I knew from my old days as chief, Ms. Denise Albright. She was tough, brilliant, and hated bullies more than I did. After reviewing the envelope Paul gave me, plus the new threats and arson attempt, she leaned back and said, "This HOA is operating like a private mafia. This is enough to launch a civil suit and potentially a criminal probe. But I'll need time. You need to stay safe and gather more proof." I nodded. "I don't want this just for me. I want it for every family they've bullied." Paul spoke up. "I know of at least 3 others, the Hansons, the Patel family, and Miss Lynn. They've all gotten harassed for not following HOA orders that don't even apply to them." Raymond leaned forward. "Then it's time to go public. You ready?" I thought about my grandkids, about Duke, about this land. I've never been more ready. That evening, we held a private meeting on the ranch. I invited the other victims Paul had mentioned. Each one arrived quietly, looking over their shoulders as if they were breaking the law just by being there. Miss Lynn, a retired school teacher, shared how Karen threatened to fine her $500 for painting her mailbox too bright. Mr. and Mrs. Hanson said their garden was dug up because it didn't follow landscape guidelines, even though it was on their side of the boundary. The Patel family, young couple with 2 toddlers, had been receiving fines for noise violations every time their kids played in the backyard. Raymond recorded everything: stories, details, patterns. We were building a case. Karen thought I was alone. She had no idea I was building an army. Around 11 p.m. that night, I was doing a final sweep of the property. Just me, my flashlight, and the coyotes in the distance. That's when I spotted something strange. Near the back fence, hidden in the brush, was a black trail cam, mounted on a post I didn't put there. I walked over, carefully unscrewed it, and looked at the logo. HOA property. Do not remove. I smirked. Oops. Inside, it was full of images. Photos of me, my family, visitors, even my dogs. They were watching us. Every move. I brought it to Raymond. "This," he said, holding the cam in his gloved hands, "just became federal. Illegal surveillance on private property." Then the front gate alarm buzzed. I rushed to the camera screen. A vehicle was parked just outside, a black SUV, the license plate. It belonged to Karen, and she wasn't alone. Behind her stood 2 men, Greg Matthews and another guy I didn't recognize. All 3 of them were wearing matching HOA jackets. Karen stepped forward and shouted loud enough for the microphone to pick it up. "You have 24 hours to vacate, or we will come back with more than just warnings." Then she threw something over the gate. It landed at my feet, a formal eviction notice, stamped with fake HOA legalese. But the bottom was signed in real ink. Karen J. Miller, HOA President and Enforcer of Community Wellness. Enforcer? This woman had just declared war. I looked at Raymond. "I think it's time we show her who she really messed with." He nodded slowly. "Let's bring in the badge." But as we turned to head back inside, a loud bang echoed through the trees, followed by the sharp crack of a window shattering in the main house. We dropped low, instincts kicking in. Someone just shot at us. And they weren't aiming to scare. They were aiming to hit. The sound of shattering glass still rang in my ears as I crawled low behind the porch railing, my body moving out of instinct, not thought. Raymond was already pressed to the side of the house, weapon drawn. "Single shot, high-powered rifle," he muttered. "Came from the tree line, same direction as the arson." I reached for the old lockbox beneath the porch bench, the one only a few knew existed. Inside lay my personal firearm, a Beretta M9, issued back in the force. I hadn't used it in years, but muscle memory kicked in like I never stopped. "I told you, Ray," I growled. "She's not just power-hungry. She's dangerous." He scanned the horizon. "We've got to move. Fast. They don't think you'll fight back." Wrong. I live by 3 rules. Protect what you build. Protect who you love. Never, ever run from bullies. Raymond covered me as I crept toward the side barn. My surveillance screens inside the house would have caught the direction of the muzzle flash, but it was too risky to go back just yet. I needed eyes on the trail. We rounded the back fence and found the flattened brush, fresh footprints size 11. Tire tracks too. Someone had parked off-road just beyond the HOA trail, behind the trees. Smart move, but not smart enough. I pulled out my phone, connected to the barn cam via hotspot and rewound the footage. There. A man in a black hoodie, same build as before, same watch glinting in the moonlight. Greg Matthews. Again. But this time, I caught a partial plate number as he sped off in a black truck. 2GV5 something. Enough to get a match. Raymond smiled grimly. We got him now. Between this and the gas can, we're looking at arson, illegal surveillance, attempted assault with a deadly weapon, maybe even conspiracy. I nodded. Let's build the case. The whole case. I'm tired of playing defense. The next day, I made some calls. The kind of calls only a retired police chief could make. Old friends, detectives, a few judges who still owed me favors, and one particular person, FBI Special Agent Taylor Dean, white-haired, cool as ice, and known for loving one thing more than justice, tearing apart corrupt institutions. She called back within 2 hours. Frank, she said, voice crisp. Heard you've got a local HOA acting like a cartel. You heard right, I replied, and they just fired a bullet through my house. She didn't hesitate. I'm sending a team. Off books for now. Keep your recordings safe. Don't engage directly. Let us do what we do best. I hung up, exhaled slowly, and looked at the land. My ranch. My peace. The place I almost lost to paperwork, threats, and now a bullet. But I wasn't scared. Not anymore. Back at the ranch, Paul Carter brought me even more documents, ones he'd secretly copied during his time as HOA secretary. There were expense reports with missing funds, signatures forged to approve budget allocations for surveillance operations, HOA dues used to pay for private investigators, and worst of all, emails between Karen and Greg discussing removal strategies for non-compliant ranchers. This is it, Paul said. This is everything. Raymond looked it over. They're going down. That evening, I hosted another meeting at the ranch, this time with the families Karen had targeted, plus a few new faces. People who had lived in fear for too long. One elderly man stood up, Mr. Carter Sr., Paul's father. His hands shook as he held up a notice he received 2 weeks ago. Mandatory relocation, due to future HOA development projects. They tried to evict me, he said softly, from the house I built with my wife 50 years ago. A young mom broke down in tears, saying Karen threatened to take her kids from her using fake CPS complaints because her grass wasn't cut to code. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up and said, "No more hiding. This land is ours. We're not backing down." They nodded. Hope flickered in their eyes again. Raymond spoke next, calmly but firmly. "There's an FBI agent coming in to help, but we need to be smart. Document everything. Save all notices, texts, calls, and be careful. Karen and her crew are getting desperate." The sun had barely set when I walked Paul back to the gate. That's when we heard a loud snap in the woods behind us. A silhouette darted across the trail. Too fast for a deer. Too sneaky for a jogger. I raised my flashlight and shouted, "Who's there?" No answer. But then, boom! An explosion rocked the air. A fireball burst up from the east side of the ranch, the old tool shed. We ran. Flames roared against the twilight sky. Karen had set another fire, this time closer to the house, this time louder, this time intentional. As I fought the flames, coughing and choking through the smoke, I realized she wasn't trying to scare me anymore. She was trying to destroy everything. Everything. We barely saved the house. The shed was gone. Raymond dragged a charred canister from the ashes, another gas can. Same kind. Same burn pattern. "You think she'll stop?" he asked. "No," I said, gripping my hands into fists. "But I will." Just then my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a threat. It was an email. From a local newspaper reporter I'd tipped off the day before. Subject: confirmed. We're going live tomorrow with the HOA expose. Public records, your interview, and video clips included. Buckle up. I showed the screen to Raymond. He smirked. Karen's about to have the worst week of her life. But just as we were about to head back inside, we heard a slow clap from beyond the gate. We turned. Karen stood there, alone, wearing all black, hands behind her back, smile wide and poisonous. "You really think you've won?" she hissed. "You don't understand, Chief. I don't lose. Not in this town. Not with my people." I stepped closer to the gate, calm, collected. "This isn't your town. This isn't your land, and you just burned your last bridge." She leaned forward, lips curled. "Then let's see who burns next." And with that, she turned and walked into the night. The next morning the air felt heavier, like the land itself was holding its breath. Ash still clung to the tool shed's ruins, and the scent of smoke hovered like a warning. But I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not after Karen made it personal. I sat on the porch at dawn, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, refreshing the local news page. And there it was. Headline: HOA corruption exposed. Former police chief speaks out against harassment, arson, and abuse of power. The article was brutal. Detailed accounts from residents, photos of the bullet hole in my window, quotes from HOA board members who had quietly resigned overnight, screenshots from Karen's fake eviction orders, even footage from my surveillance cameras showing Greg's Rolex as he lit the fire. The story spread like wildfire. Within an hour, local TV stations picked it up. By noon, the mayor had called a press conference declaring a full investigation into alleged misconduct by the Horseshoe Valley Homeowners Association. Karen didn't show up to the HOA office that day, but someone else did. 3 unmarked black vehicles pulled up outside the HOA building at 1:17 p.m. Suits stepped out, calm, quiet, professional, FBI. I stood at the edge of my property with binoculars, watching from a distance. Raymond stood beside me, arms folded. "They're going after digital files first," he said. "Emails, finances. The paper trail will take longer, but they'll get there." "And Karen?" I asked. He smiled grimly. "Let's just say she'll be home by curfew. Federal curfew." But while the feds made their move, Karen wasn't done. At 3 p.m., my gate alarm buzzed again. This time it wasn't her SUV. It was a delivery van, unmarked, old, rusted, and what it dropped off made my stomach turn. A sealed box, no address, no label, just my name in sharp red marker. Frank. Raymond approached it carefully. "Step back. Could be rigged." He opened it slowly, using gloves. Inside, a broken sheriff's badge. My old badge number, snapped in half. Burned edges, and underneath it, a photo. A photo of my grandkids playing near the pasture. I felt cold all over. Not fear, something worse. Rage. She'd crossed the line. Again. "Raymond," I said, my voice low. "Call Taylor. Now. Tell her it's personal." FBI agent Taylor Dean arrived that evening. Blonde, short, stern face. No smile, just purpose. "I've dealt with dirty mayors, rogue developers, even church councils drunk on power," she said, walking the ranch perimeter with us. "But HOA Karen? She's built herself a kingdom with no rules." I handed her the box, the badge, the photo. She stared at them for a long time. Then she nodded. "I'll pull her bank records, open her emails, and track that van. Give me 48 hours. That night, I stayed up late again. Couldn't sleep. Not after the picture of my grandkids. Not after realizing Karen might not be working alone. The neighborhood wasn't just silent. They were scared, controlled. And when fear controls people, they'll lie, cheat, even cover up crimes just to avoid attention. I sat in my study, flipping through Paul's documents again when I spotted something I'd missed before. A memo from the HOA marked confidential. It listed payouts. Karen's signature sat beneath a payment of $3,200 to a security subcontractor. There was no name, but a bank account number was visible. I sent it to Taylor immediately. She replied in 5 minutes. That account belongs to Sam Pike, ex-con, works freelance, former enforcer for a failed security firm, known arsonist. My jaw clenched. Karen had hired a criminal to scare me off my land, to possibly harm my family. This wasn't about HOA bylaws anymore. This was organized crime. The next day, everything exploded. Karen was arrested at 6:03 a.m. The news caught it live. Helicopters overhead, neighbors filming from porches, FBI escorting her out in cuffs, sunglasses hiding her face as she screamed about a setup. But we weren't done. By noon, Greg was arrested too, caught trying to withdraw cash from a joint account he shared with Karen for community improvement expenses. The entire HOA board resigned by 3 p.m., but just when we thought the firestorm was over, something worse happened. The sheriff's department called me directly. "Frank, we picked up Sam Pike," the deputy said, "but you're not going to like what we found." I waited, holding my breath. He had blueprints of your house, entry points, power grid layout, security camera blind spots. Raymond slammed his fist on the table. They were planning a home invasion. Not a threat, not a warning, an attack. They wanted me out permanently, and they weren't stopping just because Karen and Greg were behind bars. There were others, still out there, watching, waiting. And just as I stood up to go check the house, a note slid under my back door, typed, no signature. "It's not over, Chief." I stared at the note in my hand, the words digging into me like barbed wire. "It's not over, Chief." No name, no threats, just a message, but it was loud and clear. They wanted me to know they were still out there, whoever they were. Karen and Greg were behind bars. The HOA board had crumbled. But the rot went deeper. There were still shadows clinging to this land, still people who thought they could win through fear. Raymond stood beside me, his expression hardening as he read the note over my shoulder. "This isn't just Karen anymore. Someone else is pulling strings. Karen was just the face." I nodded slowly. "And whoever it is, they're still playing dirty." I turned on every camera feed on the property, double-checked the locks, pulled my backup drive from the safe and updated everything. Then I called Taylor. "Another threat," I told her. "Hand-delivered." She didn't sound surprised. "We're running the bank accounts connected to the HOA. I've already found 3 hidden transfers, same dates as the arson, same amounts, all linked to a shell company registered under a different name, Valley Asset Reclaiming LLC. I frowned. Reclaiming? For what? "Land," she said. "That company's connected to a property developer out of Phoenix. Name's Ethan Cross, real estate magnate. Been accused of bullying homeowners into selling land. Never convicted, always uses proxies." "Like Karen?" "Exactly." Suddenly, it all clicked. This was never about yoga trails or bounce houses. It was about my land. 20 untouched acres of ranch land on the edge of a growing HOA. A perfect development target. And I was standing in the way. "Can you tie him in?" I asked. Taylor exhaled. "Not yet, but we will. Keep your doors locked. Watch the tree lines. They know your defenses now." I hung up and turned to Raymond. "We're going to Phoenix." That evening, we drove into the city. Ethan Cross had a tall glass office building downtown. Big silver letters. Security guards at every entrance. Cameras everywhere. We didn't try to storm in, that wasn't the plan. Instead, we met someone on the outside. A janitor named Luis. He worked overnight shifts and had been ignored and mistreated by Cross's staff for years. When Taylor reached out quietly through an FBI contact, he agreed to help. He slipped us a folder, photocopies of internal memos. Inside, a proposal to build a luxury subdivision called Silver Glen Estates, right on top of my ranch. And on page 3, the projected cost for land acquisition included a line that read, "Mitigation of landowner resistance through HOA enforcement actions." They planned it all. The harassment, the drones, the threats, even the arson. Cross didn't care how. He just wanted the land. Raymond took one look and growled, "This is the smoking gun." But it wasn't just my land. Maps in the folder showed 5 other properties in the region marked as resistance targets. Families, veterans, elderly folks. We weren't just fighting for my home. We were standing in the way of a silent war against people too tired or too scared to fight. Raymond picked up his phone. "Taylor, we've got your link to cross. It's time." The next morning was quiet. Too quiet. No texts, no gate alarm, no shouting. It felt wrong. I did my usual checks, walked the property line, patted Duke's neck where the scar still showed. Paul had come by with breakfast. Raymond was inside, writing up statements for the FBI. Then, right around 11:32 a.m., my gate camera went dark. Not offline. Disabled. I ran to the control box. Wires were cut, clean and precise. Professional. Seconds later, my power flickered. Then it cut out completely. I reached for my phone, but the signal was jammed. No bars, no Wi-Fi. "Raymond," I shouted. "We've got company." He burst out the door, gun holstered, phone in hand. "Dead signal, we're blind." Then, from the trees, they came. 4 men, tactical vests, black masks, moving fast and quiet, armed. I grabbed the old Winchester rifle from behind the porch column and ducked behind a bale of hay. Raymond moved to the barn's corner, using the tractor as cover. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't warn. They just opened fire. Bullets struck the porch wood, splinters flying past my ears. One shot shattered the coffee mug I'd left behind just minutes earlier. This was it. They were here to finish what Karen started, to erase me and take the land. But they didn't count on one thing. I may be retired, but I trained for this, and I don't miss. I lined up a shot, waited for the lead intruder to move past the watering trough, and fired. His leg buckled. He screamed and dropped his weapon, crawling for cover. The others scattered. Raymond hit one square in the shoulder with his Glock, sending him spinning to the ground. But 2 were still moving. One tried to flank the side barn, where Paul had hidden. I sprinted across the field, leaping over the fence, and tackled the man before he got close. We tumbled hard, fists flying. He was younger, faster, but I was stronger, meaner. He reached for a knife. I punched his arm hard, knocking it free. Then, sirens, loud, close. Taylor had traced the signal cut. FBI SUVs came roaring down the trail like thunder, tires screeching, agents jumping out with rifles raised. "Down on the ground, now!" The last man froze, dropped his weapon, raised his hands. It was over. The agents secured the area. Raymond and I sat on the porch, bruised, bloodied, exhausted. Taylor walked up holding a tablet. "We traced the van these men came in," she said. "Rental. Paid for by Valley Asset Reclaiming LLC. She paused. "And guess who was just arrested boarding a private jet out of Phoenix?" I raised an eyebrow. "Ethan Cross?" She nodded. "With enough evidence to charge him with conspiracy, racketeering, assault, and attempted murder." She smiled slightly for the first time. "And your ranch? Officially protected. Federal order. No development allowed. Ever." As the sun dipped behind the hills, families from the community began to arrive at the ranch. The Hansons brought pie. The Patels brought their kids. Even Miss Lynn came with a handmade "Thank you, Chief Frank" banner. One of my grandsons ran up and hugged me tight. "Grandpa, did you stop the bad guys?" I smiled through a busted lip. "We stopped them, buddy. Together." Raymond raised a toast with sweet tea. To truth, to standing up, and to never giving up our land. Everyone cheered, and just like that, peace returned. But as I watched the stars come out over my ranch, I knew one thing for sure. No matter what comes next, I'll always protect what's mine. Because this land isn't just dirt. It's my legacy, my home. And no HOA in the world is strong enough to take that from me. The dust from the FBI SUVs had long settled. The bruises on my arms had turned yellow. The broken porch railing had been replaced by a stronger oak beam that I carved myself. But the fight, the memories, they stayed. This wasn't just about land. It was about home. About how power corrupts when good people stay silent. About standing tall, even when you're tired, and telling bullies, not today. A week had passed since Ethan Cross was dragged off his private jet in cuffs, and Karen Miller had been escorted into court in an orange jumpsuit, fuming and shouting about a media conspiracy. Greg Matthews turned state's witness almost immediately, singing like a parrot to save himself from doing 20 years. And Sam Pike, he was hit with federal charges, conspiracy to commit arson, attempted assault, and illegal possession of a firearm. When they found out he was stalking other families too, the list of charges tripled. Taylor Dean, the FBI agent who helped bring all of them down, visited the ranch one last time. She handed me a folder. "Frank, it's official. The Department of Justice is launching a new task force to investigate HOA abuse cases across the country." She smiled. "You didn't just save your land. You started a movement." I chuckled. "I just wanted to drink coffee in peace and watch my horses." She laughed. "And now you're a symbol of property rights." The very next morning, I stood at the edge of my property, sipping coffee from a new mug. This one with bold black letters that read, "Not under your HOA." Paul Carter, now leading the neighborhood's rebuilding committee, walked up with a clipboard. "Mr. Marshall," he said proudly, "we've replaced the HOA with a new neighborhood care group. No dues, no fines, just folks helping each other out." I nodded, watching Miss Lynn's grandkids fly kites in the open field across the trail. "That's how it should have been from the start," I said. Paul hesitated. "We also want to name the East Trail after you." "Marshall's Watch." I paused. Then I smiled. "Only if you spell it with one L." He laughed, got the joke, and saluted. Later that day, I visited Duke, the old stallion who took a bullet during this madness. He was recovering well, thanks to Dr. Page. He nudged my shoulder as I fed him an apple. "You stood your ground, old boy," I whispered. "You didn't let them scare you." The wind rustled the trees gently, almost like the land was whispering back. Peace. Real peace. Not silence forced by fear, but calm earned through courage. That evening, we had a ranch gathering. Families brought food, kids rode ponies. Music played from an old speaker. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years finally laughed around the fire pit. Even the mayor showed up. He raised a toast and said, "Let Frank Marshall be a reminder. When injustice comes knocking, it won't find him shaking, it'll find him standing." Everyone cheered, but I just nodded and watched the stars come out. Because at the end of the day, I wasn't doing this for applause. I did it for the land. For the people. For every homeowner who just wanted to live in peace. Around midnight, as the last cars pulled away, I walked the property one final time that night. Every light was off. The cameras were still rolling, the gate was locked, but the land was alive. My land. And as I stood beneath the moon, hand resting on the wood of my rebuilt porch, I whispered one final promise. You came with drones. You came with fire. You came with guns, but I'm still here. And I always will be. Because I'm Frank Marshall, retired police chief, defender of my ranch. And this land isn't for sale. Not now. Not ever. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments below and tell us, have you ever had to deal with an HOA nightmare? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more jaw-dropping real stories like this one. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and stand your ground. And your